Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're taking a look at some very cool battles in the Open Master League featuring level 50 Shadow Chandelure. These battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, Phil the Boss, so many thanks for the battle submission. Now for the team, this trainer is running Zekrom on the lead with a Shadow Mamoswine safe switch and Shadow Chandelure as the closer. Shadow Chandelure is incredibly glassy. Honestly, even a light breeze probably KOs this thing, but the damage output it has is awesome. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's see some fun battles with Shadow Chandelure. Hopping to the first match, picking up a tough lead, leading Zekrom into Dialga. Immediate save switch into the Shadow Mamoswine to check and see if the opponent does have any potential water types lurking in the back. Opponent stays in with Dialga, shields the Avalanche, and now they're going to counter switch into Mewtwo. Mewtwo able to reach Psystrike incredibly quickly, and the Psystrike is going to grab a shield from the Shadow Mamoswine. Mamoswine farming up the perfect overfarm, going for the Avalanche just before Psystrike number 2 is reached. Avalanche is going to be shielded. Opponent accidentally overfarms too much and lets Mamoswine make it to another Avalanche. Avalanche gets the Mewtwo to 1 HP. I think the opponent may have thought that they got KO'd there, so they actually stop tapping and they get Powder Snowed down. Back in comes the Dialga. We see a pivot into the Zekrom. In the back, oh no, the opponent has Lugia, and they don't know it yet, but they are going to regret using their 2 shields so early in the match, as in the back, we have the bringer of damage, Shadow Chandelure. In comes the Shadow Chandelure. Opponent only going to be able to make it to 1 move here, so this is a pretty safe shield. Opponent full sends the Aeroblast. That is a massive shield. Chandelure gets the farm down. All that's left in the back is the Dialga, and the Dialga has absolutely nowhere to run. Shadow Ball from the Shadow Chandelure gets the knockout onto Dialga, and that's a good game. Moving into the next match, leading Zekrom into Mewtwo. Honestly, not a terrible lead for Zekrom. Zekrom can stay in here for a bit, but may want to save switch out of here eventually, as of course you do need to check for a potential Kyogre in the back. Psystrike connects, that does quite a lot of damage. Zekrom goes for the crunch as soon as it gets it. Opponent is going to make a catch onto Melmetal. Melmetal going to be answered by the Shadow Chandelure. Look at the Incinerates. Oh my goodness. The opponent is going to be firing off this Rock Slide. Chandelure commits the shield and gets the full farm down. Chandelure has a truly massive amount of energy here. Whatever the opponent brings in is not going to have a good time. In comes the Mewtwo. Chandelure trying to go for the Flame Charge. Unfortunately, it looks like there was a little bit of lag there. So it looked like it may have ended up being a CMP tie, when in reality, the Chandelure should have outpaced by 1 turn. Flame Charge is going to be shielded by the opponent. Chandelure continuing to farm. Oh my goodness. Going for another Flame Charge. Opponent has to shield or they will get knocked out. In the back, it's Yveltal, and look at the boosted Incinerates. Oh my goodness. Flame Charge shielded up by Yveltal. Yveltal forced to fire off a charge move as they cannot afford to take any more damage. Dark Pulse is going to get the knockout. In comes Zekrom. Opponent not going to be able to farm down the Zekrom, so they are forced to throw energy, and from here, Mamoswine is going to be able to clean up this game. In comes the Shadow Mamoswine. Shadow Mamoswine able to make it to the Avalanche, not hitting any bubbles here as they are not needed. Avalanche still gets the KO onto Yveltal, and that's a good game. Zekrom met with a familiar lead in the next match as it leads into another Dialga. Same game plan as before, we're going to see the save switch into the Shadow Mamoswine. Like last time, this opponent is not switching out, so Mamoswine is going to strike first, going for the Shadow Avalanche. Shadow Avalanche does pick up a shield from the opponent. Opponent going for the Iron Head. This will absolutely knock out here unless Mamoswine commits the shield. Mamoswine continuing to farm. Dialga not switching out, so Dialga is now going to be hit with the Avalanche. This Avalanche is not enough to KO, but the opponent double shielding the Dialga, so it looks like whatever they have in the back is not a massive fan of the Mamoswine. This is where things get a bit uncomfortable, as now you kind of have to send in the Zekrom. Zekrom opting to let this through. It is just going to be the Iron Head from the Dialga, and now Zekrom needs to make it to a charge move, and does, getting to the crunch. This is going to be getting rid of the Dialga, and then it's all up to Shadow Chandelure with 2 shields. In the back, it's a Togekiss, and Togekiss is going to switch out into a Giratina. And this is where the opponent is going to wish they had shields. Shadow Ball, massive damage. Get that Giratina out of here. In comes the Togekiss, and Shadow Chandelure will not be denied. Shadow Ball KOs the Charmer, and Shadow Chandelure takes the win. Moving into the next match, picking up a positive lead, Zekrom into Heatran. We actually see a simultaneous save switch, Shadow Mamoswine into Mewtwo. A very risky play here by Phil the Boss, predicting the opponent would immediately switch out and queuing that switch so that this way the Mamoswine is not behind on energy. It's definitely a risky strategy, as if the opponent stayed in, then Mamoswine would get absolutely crushed by massive super effective damage from Fire Spin, but it ends up working out. So a very advanced prediction by Phil the Boss, but it works out nicely. Psystrike connects, Zekrom gets the farm down. In the back, it's a Giratina origin, and this is looking tough. This is looking quite tough. We're going to see the crunch fired off by the Zekrom. The opponent lets it go, and this suddenly looks winnable. Do you let this through and just go for 2 shield Chandelure? Ominous Wind gets the knockout. In comes the Heatran. Heatran getting melted by the Incinerates, and the opponent resigns the match. Zekrom is greeted with an amazing lead in the next match as it leads into Ho-Oh. And even better, the Ho-Oh is staying in this matchup. Ho-Oh gonna fire after 3 Incinerates. This is going to be the Brave Bird and Dip strategy. Brave Bird is resisted, but it still does some pretty solid damage to Zekrom. In comes the Dialga save switch. We're now gonna see the Crunch fired by the Zekrom, looking for some chip damage and a debuff, but the debuff is not to be. In comes the Shadow Mamoswine. Mamoswine will be able to get the knockout here with the Avalanche, so the opponent is forced to commit a shield. Opponent over farming quite a bit. Very nice counting by the opponent as they go for the Iron Head just before the Avalanche is reached. A no shield by the Mamoswine, choosing to save shields for the Chandelure. Zekrom gets farmed down. At this point, it's all up to the Candle. Candle gets the farm down. Opponent is going to send in the Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh going to be hit with the Shadow Ball. Only 1 shield remaining for the opponent. When do they use it? Shadow Ball picks up the knockout. What do they have in the back? It's a Groudon, and this is looking very, very tough, as I think the opponent might be able to just commit to a Mudshot farm down here. Flame Charge is shielded. Come on, Chandelure. Chandelure gets to the Flame Charge, but the Mudshot KOs. And that's sometimes what happens when you run Glass Cannons. They are high risk, high reward. On to the next match, leading Zekrom into Dragon Tail Garchomp. Zekrom tries to go for the CMP tie as the opponent makes it to the Sand Tomb, but they don't go for it, so they just get an entire Dragon Tail for free. In comes the Mamoswine, calling the bait. It's the outrage. Mamoswine gets taken to 1 HP. The opponent sends in their Metagross, and that's a decision they may not be happy with once they see the Shadow Chandelure. They are going to be able to make it to an Earthquake, but this is a very safe 1 shield farm down for the Shadow Chandelure. A Chandelure with 100 energy is going to be a problem, no matter what gets brought in here. Chandelure going for the Flame Charge. Flame Charge not quite going to KO, but able to get the Incinerate farm down. In the back, it's Mewtwo, and it's all over for the opponent. No baits here, straight for the Shadow Ball. Opponent is going to commit the shield, but bad news, there's more where that came from. Shadow Ball number 2 from the Chandelure. Get that Mewtwo off my screen, and that's a good game. Hopping into the next match, and what do you know? Death, Taxes, and Dialga lead. The 3 things that are inevitable. We're going to see the save switch into the Shadow Mamoswine. Opponent staying in this matchup, so Mamo will fire off the Avalanche and grab an early shield from the opponent. Opponent farming up quite a bit of energy. Again, very nice counting from the opponent here. Firing off this energy just before Avalanche number 2 is reached. We do see the no shield from the Mamoswine, and my guess is we're going to see the Zekrom being brought back in here. As Zekrom is able to, surprisingly, withstand the Dragon Breath damage better than Chandelure, even though Zekrom is taking a super effective damage. Iron Head will connect. Zekrom letting itself get very low on health before firing off this Crunch. Crunch is going to pick up the knockout, looking to send in the Chandelure, and it's a Groudon in the back, and this is going to be tough. Going for the Shadow Ball, hoping the opponent is going to try and call a Flame Charge bait. Shadow Ball connects. Groudon able to hang on with 1 HP remaining, and Chandelure is going to commit the shield. In the back, the opponent has Giratina Origin, and unfortunately, unless the opponent tries to go for a 1 shield flex, this will be game over. Shadow Ball does get shielded, and the opponent is going to be able to take the win as they Shadow Claw down Zekrom. Picking up a decent lead in the next match, Zekrom into Melmetal. We will see a save switch into the Shadow Mamoswine, however, as ideally, you would love to see the Melmetal get aligned onto the Shadow Chandelure later in the game. The Avalanche bait is able to grab a shield from the opponent. Opponent will have to go for Superpower to do any meaningful damage, so we will see an early shield from the Mamo. Mamo continuing to farm. A superpower at -1 is not going to be enough to KO here. Granted, it does a ton of damage, but the nice thing here is that since the opponent has 0 fast move pressure, even a move that does like 75% of Mamoswine's health is not going to be an issue because they have no ability to farm down. They go for another superpower. In comes the Chandelure, and now we see the opponent going to send in Garchomp. Garchomp now going to be hit with the Shadow Ball. This is going to hurt. Shadow Ball does big damage to the Garchomp. We see a snipe by the Zekrom opponent trying to make it to the outrage, but they are unsuccessful. In the back, it's a Dragonite. Dragonite now going to be hit with the Fusion Bolt. Fusion Bolt does quite a lot of damage. Can Dragonite make it to the move? Yes, they can with 1 HP remaining. Dragonite is going to pick up the knockout on the Zekrom as the final shield is saved for Chandelure. Chandelure needing to make it to a Shadow Ball. Opponent firing off energy, but this is a pretty safe shield for the Chandelure. Opponent going for the slightly cheaper superpower, and I mean, this was going to KO anyway, but now it definitely will. We actually see an undercharge on the Shadow Ball, establishing dominance, and that's game over. Picking up a fairly neutral lead in the next match, Zekrom into Dragonite. Gonna stay in this matchup as the Zekrom. Dragonite does have the pacing advantage, and we will see a switch and a catch of the Dragon Claw onto the Shadow Mamoswine. What does the opponent have in the back? It's a Metagross. Those bullet punches absolutely tearing through the Mamoswine. Mamoswine falls just short of making it to a high horsepower. This Metagross has a lot of energy. In comes the Chandelure. Chandelure definitely going to have to give up a shield here as Earthquake is immensely threatening. Opponent baits with the Meteor Mash, and now Chandelure, not wanting to risk the Metagross making it to another move, is going to go for the Flame Charge. Flame Charge picks up the knockout, but the opponent can send back in the Dragonite, and Dragon Breath will absolutely shred the Chandelure. They are going to send in the Dragonite. We see a switch out. Oh my goodness, into the Zekrom, going for the Crunch, and thank goodness the Fusion Bolt was not thrown, as the Crunch is caught onto an Excadrill. The Crunch did get the debuff, which is quite nice. Zekrom able to make it to Crunch number 2. This Crunch, a little bit of lag there, is going to be shielded up by the Excadrill, and now we are going to see a no shield as the opponent gets the knockout with the Drill Run. Back in comes the Chandelure. Chandelure gets the farm down. Now it's going to be a race. Can Chandelure get to double Flame Charge before it succumbs to the Dragon Breath damage? Flame Charge is shielded. Shadow Chandelure cannot get there. The Dragon Breaths are too oppressive, and that's game over. Speaking of Excadrill, we've got it on the lead in the next match, leading into Zekrom. That is not a good spot to be in, so we will see a save switch into Shadow Mamoswine, and the opponent is running ABA Steel. Oh my goodness, Chandelure lead here would have been absolutely amazing, but unfortunately the Chandelure is stuck in the back. Does the opponent know that the high horsepower was reached by the Mamoswine? Yes, they do. They double shield the Metagross. In comes the Shadow Chandelure. Chandelure up 2 shields, but forced to immediately give a shield back as the opponent goes for the Meteor Mash. Chandelure going to be hit with a second charge move from the Metagross, and just like that, both shields are gone. Chandelure is going to have to try and leverage this energy advantage to try and sweep in the endgame. Opponent going to send in Lugia. Lugia not going to appreciate Shadow Balls. Firing off the Shadow Ball, that does massive damage to the Lugia. In comes the Excadrill and disaster strikes. They're able to snipe in the middle of an Incinerate. Rock Slide picks up the knockout. In comes the Zekrom, but Zekrom cannot get to the Crunch fast enough, and this Drill Run will spell game over. The Zekrom does not have a way to farm down the Exca, and they're forced to throw energy. That Lugia in the back took a lot of damage from the Shadow Ball, but Lugia has enough HP to get that farm down. Very unfortunate there, but a great play by the opponent to snipe in the middle of the Incinerate. Great lead in the next match, leading Zekrom into Kyogre, and the Kyogre is staying in this matchup, which is incredibly surprising. Zekrom saying, you know what, I'm just going to go straight for the Fusion Bolt. Opponent committing the shield. Opponent now going to send in Shadow Mewtwo. Shadow Mewtwo not going to appreciate Crunch. Shadow Mewtwo is an incredibly powerful Pokemon, but down shields, things can get very uncomfortable for the opponent. Chandelure now going to commit a shield as the Mewtwo goes for the Psy Strike. Chandelure continuing to farm, but Chandelure is now going to be hit with a Psy Strike, and we will see the double shield. This could come down to charge attack priority, Kyogre versus Chandelure. In comes the Kyogre, but they don't throw the move. The waterfall goes through. Shadow Ball picks up the knockout. What's in the back? It's Zekrom. Zekrom trying to farm down, but the Chandelure has too much of an energy head start. Shadow Ball will connect, massive damage to the Zekrom. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. All in all, Shadow Chandelure, powering it all the way up to level 50, is a massive investment of Stardust, so props to this opponent for the dedication. I imagine it's also a beastly raid attacker, but it's cool to see what Shadow Chandelure can do in the Open Master League. As you can see, from its lack of bulk, this is an incredibly difficult Pokemon to use, so by no means is a Pokemon that is recommended when it comes to gaining Elo, but it looks to be a really fun mon, and if you can correctly leverage it, potentially get it into an energy advantage or shield advantage situation, the raw damage output from Shadow Chandelure, especially after it gets a boost or two going with the Flame Charge, is absolutely undeniable. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.